Hey, fellow mathers, before we get into this episode, we want to share with you how you can get access to free content, professional learning that will keep your students engaged and doing the math that matters. Get ready to go to this link, mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge.
That's right. Registration is open for the free Math is Figureoutable Challenge that's starting May 15th and runs to the 17th at 7 p.m. Central. We're going to have 3 nights jam-packed with learning and routines that you can take straight to your classroom.
In these challenges, we have a great time. We do some math, talk about classroom experiences, give away super cool bonuses and prizes. You won't just walk away with routines that are naturally engaging and encourage your students to think mathematically. You'll also have a chance to win over $6,000 worth in prizes, including a few virtual PD sessions for your school. I'll be joined by my wonderful co-host Kim and special guest Jenna Labe.
You can register at mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge for a fantastic learning experience. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. Now on to the show.
Hey, fellow mathematicians, welcome to the podcast where math is figure-outable. I'm Pam.
And I'm Kim.
And you've found a place where math is not about memorizing and mimicking, waiting to be told or shown what to do, but it's about making sense of problems, noticing patterns, and reasoning using mathematical relationships. We can actually mentor students to think and reason like mathematicians do. Not only are algorithms really not helpful in teaching mathematics, but rotely repeating steps actually keeps students from being the mathematicians they can be. What is?
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm not ready to start these things. I started to yawn while you were talking, and I was like, oh gosh. In my head, I was like, I hope I'm done yawning.
Because I'm that boring? Is that what's happening?
No.
Man, I don't know that you and I are ever bored talking to each other.
Oh, I mean,
I don't think I can picture a time.
Boring is not the word. Running out of time. That's always the word when we're talking to each other.
Remember when we just took that trip not too long ago? And we were like, we had this list we created for months ahead of time. We're like, we're going to talk about this. Hey, and on the plane, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about that. How much of that stuff did we actually?
Zero. We were busy doing the things the whole time. And we came home with the whole list. And our rest of our people that we work with were like, wait, I thought you were going to decide that. We barely got done what we were supposed to get done while we were there.
Oh, it was fun though. We had a good time.
Well, and that's funny that we say that because we don't do that as much anymore. You know, like we each kind of have our own thing.
Well, you had kids, right? Like, I mean, a big thing that happened is you had little kids.
Yeah.
We used to travel more together before you had kids and when your kids were super tiny.
Yeah. But then I traveled a bunch when they were little, just doing different stuff than you. Like, it was like, hey, I need you to go here and I'm going to go here. And so it was less of together. We go to places together. Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned that because when I feel like maybe even now it wasn't the last time we were together. It's been a long time, but I remember going to a particular place
together.
Together. And I think I drove and we got there, maybe a few minutes early before we even need to go in and set up.
I'm pretty sure I drove.
No, I was definitely in the driver's seat.
Okay.
Just because I remember this so vividly, it's burned into my mind. Because we laughed so hard. So, listeners, we went to a place to present together, and it was one of those things where there were a ton of people, and so Pam was like, "Hey, we'll split up. You take a group here to do the K5 group, and then I'll take the older group, and we'll do our thing at the same time, the same hours, just in 2 different rooms."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we got there a few minutes early.
We got there early because we always leave early enough.
Oh, sure.
It was a long enough drive that if something goes wrong, we wanted it. So we got there early. We had some time. That I think the school wasn't even open yet.
Yeah. Yep. And I guess we were, chatting. And at one point, one of us, probably me, was like, hey, we should probably look at, what we're doing today.
Mm-hmm,
and so I pulled my bag and put it in my lap, and Pam's got her computer bag in her lap. And we're both like kind of going through our stuff to find, our notes or whatever. And we both, put our bags back and we're holding our stuff in our hands and we look at each other. And I still laugh every time I think of this. We laughed so hard because it was very classic Pam and Kim. Because in Pam's hand, I'll say in my hands were these beautiful color-coded
Typed
typed notes of kind of times where like
multiple pages.
multiple pages of like what I wanted to do and like the examples and the times that were kind of like I'm gonna hit this mark. And I look over at Pam, and Pam has an index card in her hand with like maybe 4 things written on it. And I remember I don't think we ever looked at our stuff because I was like, what are you doing? And you were like, what are you doing? That's insane. And it was just, we laughed so hard because that's kind of our personality in general.
Mhm.
But now that I think back on it, it was classic for where we both were at the time. And I'm a like I process by writing, and so that's just kind of who I am anyway.
Mhm.
But also it's indicative of kind of where we were, right? That like I really like to think out like all the details and like what I was going to say and anticipate like questions people were going to ask and like how I would respond. And that was old hat for you by then, right? You
Mhm.
had been I was still in the classroom for later in our careers.
Mhm.
And
I've been presenting to
yeah,
teachers. I've been doing this particular presentation a lot.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And
I'd thought through that stuff over time.
yeah,
I had made decisions and notes and things,
right.
and I had, so if I could just make now 4 things. I didn't have 4 words. I probably
No, I mean,
had 4
but you
problem
knew like the
strings.
string that you were going to do. And
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
where I would have written like what I wanted to, like, I made a bolded a problem that I wanted to linger on, or like made a point off to the side that I wanted to say. You were like, I know exactly what I'm going to do with that particular string. And so there was just less. There
I
was
know,
just
yeah,
less.
I know when to shuck and jive. I know when
Yeah.
to back up. I know when to slow down if I need to. I know when
Well,
to, yeah.
and you just live with index cards in your travel, and you like have a like 175 strings, and you'll just like rifle through your stuff and you're like, that's the string I'm going to do. Where I would like rewrite it each time, it's just who I am. But I also that later, like now, I'm able to think about, as I help other teachers and like in a coaching role,
Mhm.
or like when we're helping to prepare people to go like do some presentations for you. You have said like, hey Kim, spent my time with you. And so
I paid my dues. Your turn.
so yeah. And anyway, so you and I have talked before about like other travel situations where we
Well,
go.
wait. Yeah, let me. You're going to finish. Let me say a
No,
little bit
I
more.
was just gonna say there's hotel time.
Oh gosh. But let me say a little bit more about what you just meant. Like, in other words, when Kim, or maybe you were going there, sorry, with hotel time.
No, it's okay.
When Kim and I very first started presenting together, I would have the outline. I would know what it was kind of going to be, and we would plan it, and then we would, go to the place. And the night before so the other one we were talking about was close enough that we went there that
Yeah.
morning. But often, we'd get in the hotel the night before, and we would stay up, and we would go through the presentation, and Kim would ask all these really, really good questions, and I would yawn and I would answer the questions because it was always super late. Like, we had little
Yes.
kids. We left as
Yep.
late as possible. And then we'd go through it all. And then you would go, let's do it again. And I'd be like, okay, all right, here we go. I hope I
You
can
were
think
so
well."
patient, so patient.
So that's what you meant when you were
Yeah.
like, I put in the time. I walked you through that. We did
Yeah.
then we did it together, and then we debriefed how it
Mhm.
went. And so
Mhm.
then later, when other people, I would like, Kim, will you please go train them? Please don't make me, please don't make me do that again.
I don't think you have to train anybody more than me. I like to know all the things. So yeah, and maybe even at that time, because that was way early days, you might have even had more than this card at that point.
Mhm.
Like I feel like you
Sure.
might have had some notes. So
Well,
anyway,
and let me say one more thing. Every time I had a new problem string, and that doesn't mean the first time I did it. That means the
right,
first 10 times I did it, I would have more notes on that
sure,
card for that problem string
yeah,
until I did it enough that I could kind of then, all right, now it's a part of me. Yeah.
yeah,
So that's important to know as well.
yeah. So today we want to talk to teachers specifically. So anybody can listen to the podcast, and that's fantastic. We love everyone to listen. But today we want to talk a little bit to teachers about what does it mean to plan. And so that was kind of our evolution. Now we both will have an index card going somewhere, but there is an evolution. And so what does it look like to get there, to get to the place where it feels natural and you know what you want to do? And that means more than just gathering your materials. So sometimes when people talk about, oh, I got a plan, they might like read the lesson in their textbook and make sure they have their copies or like their example book.
Mhm.
But when we say planning, it means a whole lot more than that. So we want to share a little bit about that today.
Yeah, and we're going to share what we've found to be a helpful resource. Uh,
Hmm.
you might have noticed that we don't share a ton of things on the podcast. We're super picky about what we share.
Yeah.
So if we're going to share this, we actually like it. We don't
Hmm.
think perfect, but we think it's pretty thoughtful and well done. Publicly available. We'll give you the link in the show notes where you can go there. And I'll just give a little shout out. If you have a resource like that, something that's helpful, thoughtful, well done, publicly available that we could share with listeners, we'd invite you to share that with us. So feel free to send it to Kim at mathisfigureoutable.com.
Yep. Thanks for that. I'll I'll happily take it.
Send it to me, it'll get lost. And
Yeah,
yeah,
true.
that's a fact of personality. Anyway, so this particular resource is a look for document that was created by New York City Public Schools. So there's a group there, super thoughtful. I've worked with several people at New York City Public Schools over the last few years. I have had a fantastic job working with the leadership and also working with teachers in the city. And part of what they've created is a set of 3 documents called look fors. And today we're going to talk about the look fors for student learning in mathematics. And so this particular document's 2 pages long, and it's broken up into 6 kind of areas. And it intends to help teachers think about the kinds of things to create a shared vision, kinds of things that they would look for as students are learning mathematics. And it's a way of them kind of the leadership of kind of saying, hey, like this is what we look for when students are learning mathematics. How's that going in your class? And you can use these to help you plan. So like one of them is, or there's first of all, there's an overarching actually, let me read their very first sentence at the very top of the page. Teachers, colleagues, and coaches can use this tool to observe evidence of student learning of mathematics. It is not intended to take the place of a formal observation tool. So that's a good sort of description straight from them. It has an overarching question. To what extent are students dot dot dot? So they're really like thinking about to what extent are these things happening in your classroom with students? And then here are the 6 areas. One of them is engaging. So to what extent are students engaging in reading, writing, and oral communication of mathematics? Another big area. To what extent are students reasoning through problems to find solutions? Another one, to what extent are students using technology, manipulatives, representations, models, and other tools? Another one is, to what extent are students working together to solve problems? And then, to what extent are students explaining their thinking as part of completing tasks? And the last one, to what extent are students discussing patterns and structures, making conjectures, and developing strategies?
Hey, I'm really glad that you, even though it was repetitive, didn't leave off the to what extent are students, because I think there's a lot of weight with that. Because we might say, well, my kids talk, to what extent?
Nice. My kids use tools. To what extent?
Right.
My kids make conjectures. To what extent? Yeah, that's nice. So, one other thing that I'll mention is under each of those are 2 columns, and they're the same 2 columns everywhere. And the first one kind of breaks down each of the big areas and again asks to what extent are students doing more specific things.
Mhm.
And then in the right column, it's super helpful. It actually helps illuminate, I think, this category because it says here are some focus questions, and then it asks questions for you to consider to help you think about what's happening with students in that particular section. So, Kim, to get kind of at how those questions work with the things, we thought that we would ask each other a thing that sticks out to us. And as we talk about what we're, in other words, listeners, we're not going to go through all of it. We're not going to read it to you. We highly recommend that you download it and look at it. But we did think we would pick out a thing that stuck out to us individually, and we'll kind of talk about that one thing, and that can kind of give you an idea of the structure of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, Kim, will you start with what's one of them that stuck out to you?
Yeah. So you told me to pick one,
Hmm.
and I There's a lot of good stuff here, but I picked one maybe because I felt a little convicted.
Oh,
um, Under the discussing patterns and structures section, there was one that said, to what extent are students connecting current work with mathematics previously studied and seeing where the mathematics is going? I think maybe why I felt a little bit mm,
pinged.
pinged is a good word. Was because I feel like I do this. Like, I work really hard to make connections to what we've previously done and kind of where it's going. But I wondered to myself, do I make the space for students to do this? Do I create opportunities for students to connect and imagine how this might come up again? So when I read the focus questions that kind of go to the side, it says, who expresses connections to prior knowledge and experiences? So am I raising the idea that there might be a connection and wondering, and then giving the space for them to do the connection? And then the other question was, which students connect the problem that they are working on to the big mathematical ideas? So if I say, okay, yeah, they are, which students are doing that? Is it the same
Uh,
students every time?
nice.
Are there like a cluster of students? Yeah, I mean, I felt like among all of the pages, there were so many good ones, but that one I felt like I could spend some time thinking about that.
Hmm. So can I. We just did a live math with Pam event with our journey group. And one of the things I'm aware of is I walked away from that hour. It was fantastic. People that showed up were so thoughtful. We worked really hard on what I think is a difficult thing for that teachers grapple with about how to teach order of operations in the best way possible. But I'm aware that because it was virtual, because it was virtual, I'm aware I didn't do as good of a job of thinking ahead, hey, planning about how I could have provided a space for them to have conversation about exactly what you just said, to connect what we were doing, and it was because I didn't think about the fact that it was virtual. So I remember in the moment saying to myself, okay, turn and talk to the person next to you. Oh crud, we're gonna have
Yeah.
to have breakout rooms to do that. We don't have time. I didn't think about that. Like I literally had this go through my head.
Yeah.
And so I was like, put in the chat what you're thinking about,
Yeah.
which is an okay thing. It's better than not at all. It's not the same, right? To put what
Yeah.
you're thinking about in the chat is not the same as beating it out with somebody next to you. So I'm just aware that because I didn't think about that ahead of time, that's a thing that I didn't do as well as in the moment I knew I wished I could have.
But I love that you considered that that was a thing to do. Like, you could have walked away and said, that was fantastic. And there was nothing I needed to improve. And, to be in a space where you go, I'm reflecting, and I know that's a thing that I want to strive for. And I maybe missed the mark for my own standard for this. And now it will be in your head for future things.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Okay. Tell me about one that you
yeah.
don't have to feel, feel,
That it
you
was
don't have to feel
convicting.
pinged. Yeah. Just tell me something you're thinking about.
So, in the section, to what extent are students explaining their thinking as part of completing tasks?
Uh-huh.
It says, to what extent are students explaining the mathematical basis for what they are doing rather than
Mm.
simply recalling the steps of their procedure?
Oh, dang.
So I found that that's not about convicting me. That was a bit more of me going, "Ooh, I like this document."
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
um, but what I liked about it, or one thing I liked about it, is how they sort of stated it. Like I like the way they phrased that students are explaining the mathematical basis for what they're doing. In part because I think sometimes teachers hear me say, mathing is not about algorithms, and they push back on that. They're like, what? No, of course we need algorithms, and they like instantly shut off. So I wonder if having part of this is it's not that algorithms are evil. And to be completely clear, I'm not saying that algorithms are amazing historic achievements. They're just not very good teaching tools. So to what extent are students explaining the mathematical basis for what they're doing? I think can help everybody, even if your goal today is for them to study an algorithm. Is it about recalling steps of a procedure? See, this one really is. And the focus question says, what are students doing to explain their thinking?
Mhm,
Do students explain why their process makes sense to them and how their thinking may have changed? If
mhm,
you're only teaching kids one and only one algorithm, that question, you're like, wait a minute, how could it have changed? Also, how do students express disagreement or skepticism with classmates when they think differently? that sets up this perspective that students are thinking differently, that there
Mhm.
is going to be times where they need to be able to express disagreement or skepticism. And how can we do that? And so it just sort of sets a really nice tone and background and sort of setup for how teachers can go, wait, like that's supposed to, how do I even get that to happen if all I'm doing is teaching one procedure? What would it look like to have the major strategies be a focus of class? Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I like that particular section.
That is really good. And as I hadn't paid a ton of attention to that particular one, but it's funny because as I was looking at the focus questions and you were talking about them, my brain went to a different place
Mm.
because when it says explaining the mathematical basis for what they're doing, uh, and I think it's you can focus on the procedure part, but sometimes it makes me wonder, like, oh, do I spend as much time as I'd like to talking about the mathematical properties that are at work when we're doing a particular strategy? So,
Uh-huh.
like, am I saying, oh, yay, so you added 10 and then you backed up one? Am I connecting that to with students or helping them connect or allowing the space for them to connect to the associative and distributive properties that are
Mhm.
overarching everything that we are doing?
Mhm.
Um, and it's fresh in my brain because I'm really checking for that stuff in the problem string books a lot right now. But did I know I didn't do as good of a job then in the classroom as I would now? And I don't know if that's something we talk about as much as we believe in.
Yeah.
It's people like shy away from the properties because they're like, oh, my kids heard the name and they have the definition and they have an example, but that's kind of not what the point is. So I wonder if that could also go underneath discussing patterns and structures. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely say that an evolution of my work is that I used to really just focus on kind of using the relationships and being able to represent. Well, first it was using them, and then it was being
Mhm.
able to represent them. Always kind of knowing that the properties were behind and at use.
Mhm.
But it was later in my work where I got more explicit about, oh
Sure.
yeah, like yes, let's actually here spend some time discussing, thinking about constructing what properties are at use. Kim,
Yeah.
do you remember when we created that flow chart?
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
created a flow chart of what does a mathematician think when they see a multiplication problem. And
Yeah.
part of the way, well, that was so much fun to create
Sure.
because part of what we did was color code it,
Mhm.
where there were certain sections of you get to hear and you think to yourself, ooh, this relationship pings for me. I'm going to use this strategy. And this relationship pings for me. I'm going to use this strategy, and we were able to color code it based on the properties at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was definitely an evolution in my work. And in my defense, I kind of had to build my own numeracy
Yeah.
before I could represent my and every other people's thinking, or at least kind
Yeah.
of at the same time. Before then, I kind of focused on the properties. So we're all on a journey, and we're all making more sense of all the things. Let's just keep
Sure.
on the journey. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
So, you know, all of this work of doing these, spending time with these look fors, and really asking yourself to what extent are students doing that and asking yourself these focus questions takes time.
Hmm.
And, when I spend some time working with teachers, sometimes what I hear is like, I don't have time to dive into a single lesson. I've got 6 preps and, I've
Hmm.
got to do all the things. And there's no way, like, I don't have the time for that. And so, what I would say is if you want to build the behavior of really thinking deeply about the lesson, you're going to have to start like me, maybe with maybe not typed, but really thinking through, as we talked about in the beginning of the episode, really thinking through very deeply about a lesson, about a presentation, and really starting the behavior of analyzing. And over time, you will get to the place where metaphorically you have an index card and some of these things are ingrained in you. And the questions you ask yourself and the reflection where Pam, had, after, at the end of our journey event where she was like, there's this thing that I wanted to do and I don't think I did it well. I'm going to bring it back up again when I have another one. You might pick a lesson, ask somebody to sit with you, or even if you take these look fors and you sit down by yourself and you think, okay, I'm gonna pick an area, and how deeply have I thought about this particular thing? Maybe you have a new focus each semester. There's you could work on this work over the couple of years.
Yeah,
But
and
the
I think
idea is to dive in.
that's kind of the big point of something like lesson study.
Yeah.
where they really encourage groups of teachers, or even, like you said, grab a partner, grab a coach,
Mhm.
somebody to help you think deeply about as much as you can,
Yeah.
like take a lesson, like Kim said, think deeply about that lesson, make it really good, survive the rest of the time that week, and
Right.
then carve out some more time to think deeply about the next one. And the more that you do that, the more you gain a repertoire of sort of the lessons that you built really well.
Mhm.
Kim, when I was a young teacher, I did a lot of innovating, and
Mhm.
I would innovate, and then I would take a deep breath and turn the page in the textbook for a few days.
Sure.
And then I would like, okay, all right, I have some bandwidth now. Let me innovate about the next thing. I would innovate, and then I get, like you can't change everything all the time, even crazy people like me. So we would encourage you, don't get overwhelmed, but that this document could be a way to help you create a shared vision.
Mhm.
If you can get some colleagues, your department chair, it'd be great if you had, a shoulder teaching partner to create, and it would be, honestly, the best thing to do is not to use this look for, but co-create your own.
Mhm.
Define what you think is what you want to have happening. If students are really mathing, then what would you expect students to be doing? And then refine that together. That's you're going to gain the most bang for the buck. Now, I don't
Yeah.
know that you have to start from scratch. It's one of the reasons why we're telling you about this
Yeah.
resource. I think you could pull up the one from New York City and you could say to yourself, that's not too bad. I mean, they give some references on the bottom of who they used as their inspiration. You could check those out in all your spare time. Oh, maybe you could just use this as a basis to sort of jump off. You could say, I don't even know what that means. Let's talk about it. Or
Yeah.
let's even focus on this bit and what does that mean for us here? So here's a tool, listeners, that you could use to help you co-create, create, define, and refine your vision for what it could look like to math with students.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that we hear from a lot of people who say, I'm kind of flying solo on my campus and I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a coach, or I love what you guys are talking about and but I'm all alone. I think these documents are a really good place for people to start,
Mm-hmm.
to say, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to think about my classroom. What are my students doing? And so if you are, solo and you're trying to share with your teammates, but it's not quite happening yet, this is a good place for you to have somebody outside of you who's asked some really good questions
And then
just to get you thinking.
pop in
Yeah.
our teacher Facebook group and share there, or even
Yeah.
better, join our journey group with like-minded teachers who are definitely working on the same kind of thing. Hey, Kim,
Yeah.
let's tell everybody where they can find it. The link is crazy. So the best place to do is go to the show notes. You can
Yep.
also try New York City look fors. That didn't work really well for me. I didn't find a good Google search for it to come up. So check out the link in the show notes
Yep.
to be able to download, like I said, publicly available look fors for students from New York City. We appreciate all the hard work, thoughtful work that wonderful people there put into creating it. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in and teaching more and more real math. To find out more about the Math is Figureoutable movement, visit mathisfigureoutable.com. And keep spreading the word that math is figureoutable. Thank you for listening and making math more figureoutable.
To learn even more, make sure you register for our free challenge at mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. You are not going to want to miss the evenings of May 15th through 17th, starting at 7 p.m. Central.
Math teaching, go register now. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. Join us to make math more and more figureoutable. And if you can't join live, register and we'll send you access to the recordings. We'll see you there.